Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and it's time for another whiskey tasting. And today I am doing a tasting of a South Carolina whiskey because I'm going to have Chris Crow from the distillery on the show coming up very soon, Whiskey Lore, the interviews. And while we were doing the taping of this episode, you can tell what generation I'm from, can't you? When was the last time we taped something? Maybe you tape a box, I don't know, but when was the last time we actually got some VHS tape out and recorded ourselves? Anyway, I digress. This is a whiskey that when I went down to this distillery, it's a beautiful distillery if you get a chance to go. If you're going to Hilton Head, you're passing by Bluffton, check out Burnt Church Distillery. It is not a burnt church. It's not a church at all, actually, even though it has stained glass in it. It is a distillery that is new built, but it is just beautiful inside, and they're doing a lot of things that are surrounding the history of the area, and so it's a really nice distillery. When you walk in, there will be a wow moment. It is that kind of a distillery. And this whiskey, when I went down there 8 months ago, they were just starting to distill. In fact, I don't think they'd actually fired distills up yet at that point. So they had to do some contracting to get started to have some whiskey. But what they did was they came up with their mash bills, and then they had Jephthah Creed in Kentucky do their contract distilling, and then they aged in smaller barrels and then brought the whiskey down to that warm, deep South Carolina climate. So it's going to be really interesting to see how their whiskeys are aging down in that climate at this moment. And I will have some more samples coming up. So I'll be doing some more tastings of their whiskeys. They're not widely available. They have fascinating mash bills, and it's one of the things that really excites me about what they're doing. The whiskey I'm doing a tasting on today is a rye whiskey, but it is also a whiskey that contains wheat and malted barley. So it's at least 51% rye to be able to be called a rye whiskey. And so there should be a bit more rye on the nose. 47% ABV, a little bit of an alcohol burn on the nose. Don't take a big wafting breath. A lot of earthiness to this. The rye that they're using has a very kind of what I call a dried flowers, herbally kind of a rye scent to it. The mash bill on this is rye, wheat, malted barley, and interesting that it does not have any corn in it. And so the idea here is that it's not going to be quite as aggressive, and maybe that wheat softens some of that peppery note on the whiskey. A little bit of oak comes through as well. I gotta be honest with you, I can't believe that they aged this for, I think he said 2 years in a 15-gallon barrel, because I would imagine, in my mind, that might be a little long, and you might get a lot of oak influence on this. But this has a little bit of a fresh oak, kind of sawdust kind of smell to it, but it's not overly aggressive. Cheers. The toffee note comes through first. Really nice distillate. Pepper note comes in on the finish. There's a graham cracker note. I get a cola note. A little bit of cherry in there and a little bit of that vanilla from the oak. But that graham cracker, so a little bit of honey, a little grain note coming through as well. And then that peppery note, really pleasant finish. Leaves you with the grain. And yeah, I mean, the grain is the primary thing at the end. I think I said initially Chex Mix on the nose. I actually get a little bit of that grain note on the finish as well. And so, yeah, that graham cracker is still there. It's a really interesting whiskey. And one of the things I noticed when I went to the distillery and tasted their 4 whiskeys was that there was a little cherry influence on each of them. But when I did the retasting on them, it evolved, because my palate has evolved, into a cola note, which is a little cherry to me and a little bit of a oak nut, nutty kind of a, well, not so much the nuttiness as the vanilla. The vanilla you get out of that, because when I think of cola, I think of vanilla and cherry together. This is how I'm learning to deconstruct, and actually it's widening my vernacular on whiskey, because I've gone from saying graham cracker to understanding that graham cracker is part honey, part grain, and that cola for me is part cherry and part vanilla. And so it helps me actually dig in and find more flavors when I identify a top level thing that I can break down into smaller component parts. Really nice whiskey. I mean, on the nose, like I say, this really comes at you with that herbally rye, but as you drink it, you get more of the barrel influences without necessarily overly oakiness, but more of that vanilla coming through, and then that really nice move into that cherry that's probably coming from the wheat, and that peppery note that comes from the rye, but it's not overly aggressive. And so it's really interesting whiskey, named after Palmer Stretch, which is a road that was called Palmer Stretch because of a man that lived on that road named Palmer. And then after a while, it became Burnt Church Road, which is where the distillery gets its name from. So we'll talk all about that history and get into that during the podcast episode. But no, this is a good whiskey. This is a good whiskey, an amazing out of a 15-gallon barrel. And I gotta say, when I went to Jeff the Creed, I went there when they first opened up, and the whiskeys that I was tasting were young. And when I tasted these and realized they came from that same distillery, I say, you know what? I need to go back to Jeff the Creed, because I sense that they have gotten past those early batches and that there's something really good going on there. Because the whole lineup of what I've had from Burnt Church I've liked, and they sourced those original whiskeys from Jeff the Creed. So very interesting. Have you guys been to South Carolina? Have you headed down to Hilton Head? Burnt Church, I'll tell you, it'd be an interesting distillery for you to go see. And they do tours down there now. And if you guys enjoyed the video, give me a like, comments if you have comments, subscribe if you'd like to watch more of these videos along the way. And maybe once I get up and do a tasting over at Jeff the Creed, I can do a video and let you know what I experienced while I was there. But love what they're doing at Burnt Church. And until next time, cheers and Slàinte mhath. Really nice. Ooh, a little espresso note there. That's got some really nice flavors flowing around in it. Nice. Dark chocolate.